Gary Gaston. I'm the design director here, and on behalf of our staff and our board of directors, I'd like to welcome you all. Thanks for braving the traffic on a busy Thursday night. It's amazing how much is going on in Nashville, and it's becoming increasingly exciting and fun to be downtown, but it also can create limitations sometimes for getting here. So thank you for coming out and being here. I just want to, before we get started with the program, tell you a little bit about some of our upcoming events. And first of all, I want to recognize Yazoo for being our corporate beverage sponsor. Thank you. It's the best applause I get at every event. Also, I would like to, if you're not a member of the Civic Design Center, I'd like to encourage you to pick up one of these on the way out and to sign up and be a member of our organization. It's a way for individuals to support the work that we do, and I think we're doing a great job. I hope you do too. And so it's just a portion and a way to support our ongoing work and mission here in Nashville. So we really appreciate that. We've got some great coming events that are going to be linked to our Urban Design Forum. In April, we have Greg Pasquarelli of Shop Architects, Sharples, Holt, and Pasquarelli in New York City. They've done international work, super famous. Greg spoke here about 10 years ago the first time and has not been back since, and his practice in the meantime has gone from about 8 people to 80. And some of the recent projects are the Atlantic Yards, Barclays Center, and the Domino Sugar redevelopment in Brooklyn that's been in multiple architecture magazine publications. So that event will be happening at Newhoff, and it's a perk of membership to come. You get in free. There'll be a fee for non-members, so another perk of being a member of the Design Center. And then and that is on April the 18th, and it's at Newhoff up in Germantown. We also are going to have on May 16th a sneak peek tour of the Music City Center. So that'll be exciting to go see a tour with the architects to show us the nooks and crannies of the building. So, and I'm also going to announce the Nashville Next Doug Farr speaker will be on this coming Monday, and that'll be at Scarrett Bennett. So if you haven't been attending those, they've been a great and wonderful series for the city as a part of the new general plan update process. So without further ado, I want to introduce our program tonight, which is the presentation of the Sobro, the South of Broadway Strategic Master Plan. And this is something that's really exciting and great for our city. Its timing is perfect with the coming opening of the convention center and all the different development projects that have been announced and are ongoing in the city right now. So I have 2 presenters tonight that are absolutely no strangers to us at the Civic Design Center. Former presidents, both presidents, Ken Hawkins and Hunter G. And I will let them give a little more introduction if you want. Hunter, are you going to kick it off?
I'll kick it off.
Okay, all right. Yeah, up here.
Thanks, Gary. I'm going to just give a real quick little intro and turn over the mic to Kim to give the bulk of the presentation, and then she'll let me, I guess, conclude. But I want to say a couple of things. First of all, being involved with this project was really, for me, very special and very personal. I see a lot of faces in the room that probably know why that is, and Kim and I and Gary and many of you here in the room about 15 years ago were involved in quite a controversy in the Sobro area, what was called the Franklin Street Corridor, which was a 6-lane thoroughfare that was planned to go from East Nashville to West Nashville. And the reason we were involved is we were doing the downtown master plan, which was at the time called the sub-area master plan. And that project really got monopolized by the debate over this 6-lane corridor that was planned. And after many months of trying to convince the city that we needed more of an urban boulevard and that it shouldn't continue all the way through downtown, fortunately, Mayor Bredesen at the time sort of pulled his trump card and said, I'm going to fund the first 2 phases, which essentially takes it to 8th, which now we see today is a 4-lane urban boulevard, KBB, terminating at 8th Avenue, and really set the stage for the future of Sobro. And for me, that was really where I cut my teeth in urban design and civic engagement and planning, and now I sit on the planning commission and really have dedicated my career to building a better Nashville and building better communities. So being a part of this was really special. It sort of comes full circle. And so for us to now think for the next 15 years what's coming was a great opportunity. We put together a great team. When the RFP came out for the project, we knew exactly who we were going to call. Urban Design Associates out of Pittsburgh. Many of you are probably familiar with them. They've got 30 plus years of experience around the country, and now over the last 10 years or so, quite a bit of international experience. They've worked in cities like Toronto and Charlotte and Seattle on their urban redevelopment projects. And one of the reasons why we called them was their plans tend to get implemented. As you know, many plans get drawn up and they sit on the shelf. And we didn't want to be a part of that. We wanted to be a part of what I believe is a very realistic plan. We've had some, during the public process, which we went through, we had people say, talking about these grand ideas, one of which is one that Jeannie and I have talked about for many years, and that was the need for sort of a bicentennial mall type park on the south side of Broadway. And that was looked at as an option. But we had our doubts as to how realistic that was. And if our entire plan, if the linchpin of our entire plan was a giant park that we knew the city would have to go acquire property, then the whole plan could just be put on the shelf at that point. So there are some very exciting things in the plan, but we really kind of felt like the big idea was handed to us, and our job was to fill in the gaps and to create a better Sobro and to find the assets that are there, capitalize on those, and make a well-integrated, mixed-use extension of our urban core toward the south, toward the interstate. So with that, Kim, and I should mention too, of course, we had a great team of other consultants, Parsons Brinkerhoff, Civil Site Design Group, Barella Public Relations, all local firms, and then the Eisen Group out of Washington, D.C. was our economic and market analyst. So Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Hunter. I'll start, and then Hunter will come in and fill in all of the gaps. And as I look around this crowd, I see a couple people who can correct Hunter and I if we get anything wrong, because several of you have been at a number of these presentations, so feel free. Again, we did have just a really excellent group, excellent team to kind of work on this, and we're lucky to have a whole lot of you all participate in the public process. The south of Broadway master plan, you kind of see the area here from the aerial, that kind of red line, which amazingly goes south of Broadway and goes around that interstate loop. One of the things that we recognized very early, it was originally called the Sobro master plan, and very quickly the determination was made to change that name to the south of Broadway master plan. And the reason was we recognized that this is an area that's already full of neighborhoods, not just Sobro. Sobro was generally thought by all of us to be that kind of blue area in the middle. So we did change that plan, recognizing the uniqueness of the multiple neighborhoods that already existed. And for many of you, as Hunter alluded to, this plan has been a very long time in the making. How many of you in this crowd participated in that first Sobro charrette in '97? There are several hands, and that was a really exciting process of being able to really, for the first time, revision what that whole part of our city might be. And so this plan is really kind of drawn out of a lot of other efforts that have come before it. And then Hunter alluded to the Sub-Area 9 plan, and how many of you remember when it was called Franklin Street? That was before it was called Gateway, and now called KBB. So there's some of you in here that remember Franklin Street and kind of what that was. and how much passion was aroused by the urban design community during that process.
It's really the catalyst for the civic
It
design.
was. It was where Urban Design Forum came from, which then led to the Design Center. And it really does go back to that. As we went through this process, Urban Design Associates really likes to think of it as a three-phase process. One of understanding, which is really that inventory of figuring out what we have in place. That second one of exploring, which is kind of that analysis in the beginning of the design idea. And then that third phase of deciding when we select what our preferred alternatives are. And then the other phase, which is really important, is implementation. And I think we have been very lucky already with this plan, and that several things are already moving forward in terms of stepping beyond that master plan. The first two are two of the critical pieces of this plan, looking at the thermal site of civic open space and exploring the pedestrian bridge options from the traditionally Sobro area to the Gulch. As well, the downtown mobility plan, which was released for RFP just a few weeks ago, and actually responses were taken last week. And those have all already come out of the South of Broadway master plan. So we're really excited about that it's already more than just a plan that's sitting on a shelf. So tonight I'm going to kind of go through a little bit about what the vision was, the market study was done for this plan by Tom Moriarty with the Eisen Group. I'll go into a little bit more detail with that than has been discussed in kind of some of the broader public meetings. The big idea, kind of where this plan is heading, and a little bit more about the details of the plan. So first of all, the vision, and this is just a beautiful illustrative rendering that that was done, kind of indicating what the overall big plan was. And so I want to hit a little bit. Part of it was the idea we recognized as we went through this process. There were a lot of things about South of Broadway that people already really liked. People liked the fact that it was fun, that it was quirky, that there were a lot of kind of creative components already there. And so our job was really just to make it something better of what it already was. The plan overall has 5 major planning recommendations that you'll hear bits and pieces of tonight, and 5 major policy recommendations. So those are, first and foremost, was the repurposing of the former thermal transfer plant site as a civic open space. The second was the connection of the Sobro neighborhood to the Gulch with a new pedestrian bridge. The third was extending Avenue of the Arts, 5th Avenue, south to intersect with Lafayette. The fourth was connecting Division Street, making a new connection across the south part of the South of Broadway over to the 2nd and 4th Avenue couplet. And the fifth was the implementation of complete streets and that transformation of Lafayette as a complete street. For the policy recommendations, the 5 primary policy recommendations were, first of all, to commission a comprehensive downtown traffic and parking study. As I mentioned, that was already underway. To refine some of MDHA's redevelopment guidelines, especially as they related to KBB, because that was a street, Korean Veterans Boulevard, very much in transition right now. So that needed to be re-explored. To explore the creation of a parking authority or a similar structure. The fourth was to incentivize stormwater, and we'll talk about that just a little bit more when we get into this, but incentivize stormwater management on site and the creation of open space. And then fourth was studying the impact of making the Lafayette neighborhood a redevelopment area. So with that, a part of the process, that inventory process, this is just one of the many, many pieces of data that was collected related to land use, and these things were explored related to land use, residential, industrial, our impervious area, etc. This one is the existence of current open space. Jeannie, isn't this your favorite slide? The current open space that was in place for the whole Sobro area. Now, I have to say, we'll give it a little bit of forgiveness here. The Rolling Mill Hill Greenway, that's right along the Cumberland River Bluff, was under construction at the time that this document was done. So that little sliver of green is not in it at the time that this was done. But this was one of the giant weaknesses that became very apparent in the plan is we have a long way to go. One of the other things, we had a number of public meetings, and quite a few of you were at some of those public meetings. We had over 500 people show up at public meetings, and during that process we had great attendance and a lot of people really active in helping us to identify what some of the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities were throughout Sobro. This happens to be the slide that indicates what those weaknesses were. And just a few of those comments were, we had limited retail, there's an aging stormwater system, there is a concentration of homeless, and actually that is kind of what that rosette of red dots represents. Not the fact that there, I want to just be really clear, it's not the fact that there are homeless, it's the fact that there is a massive concentration in that one particular location of homeless men. The gulch, of course, the idea that the lack of connectivity right there was indicated with those red dots. Some of the items that were really identified as strengths that I kind of mentioned, the idea of arts and culture and innovation happening in this area. And that was something that was really seen as a plus. Its location, right in the middle of everything. And a lot of the new investment that's been made in this area. So the Music City Center, the Gulch, Rolling Mill Hill, a lot of those things. And then I'm going to present just a tiny bit of the Eisen Group's information. I'll go through this rather quickly. They did the market study, and I thought you might be interested in a little bit of some of their numbers. So our Sobro markets are vast. They include a broad group of people. Music City Center, visitors and conference, that's where the South and Broadway master plan came out of, was the fact that the Music City Center was coming in and that we knew our city would never be the same once it opened. So how does that impact a lot of different things? And a lot in relationship to attendees and economic impact. As overall, 4.5 million people are in this city every year, will be in the city every year, as based on tourists and events. And so that is a lot of people that are being drawn to our city and right to our downtown. The downtown hotel market has been talked about a lot. There are about 4,100 downtown hotel rooms that will be in downtown. That includes the new Omni, it includes the Hyatt Place that are under construction right now. And this is just a little bit of that background on the downtown hotel market, and you'll see that there is, the Eisen Group believes that there is room for another like 8 to 12 hotels that can be supported within this area. And this is the fun little graph or spreadsheet that shows you why. This is a comparison of a lot of other comparable cities and what their approximate, this is the important kind of number right here. It's a relationship of approximate rooms per 1,000 square feet of convention center. Nashville, downtown Nashville, right now with our 1.3 million square feet of convention center, we have a 2.33 relationship. And that's walkable, and that includes those added 1,000 rooms that I mentioned with Omni and Hyatt Place. Indianapolis, right here, slightly smaller in terms of the convention center. Its ratio is more than double what ours is. These are the kinds of things, let's see, San Diego, 12.96, Austin, 6.48, and they're in the middle of adding 2,200 more rooms. So this is some of the background data that you might find interesting about why the market study is saying that Nashville can support those additional rooms. Downtown office market, just a little bit of the inventory information, 7.4 million square feet, around 40,000 downtown workers. And the downtown residential market, again, right now, 6,300 residents, projected to be 7,600. And this is one of the areas of the market study that was actually increased as the study went on. Tom Moriarty felt like he was being a little conservative with this number, and so you'll see that these residential numbers ended up increasing for the final numbers. And a lot of that is based on the fact that right now there is no availability of downtown residential. Whether you want to buy or rent, it's not available. So we're a super hot market right now for residential, and especially in our downtown. The retail market, this is interesting, just the fact that even today it would be considered that we do not meet the demand that's out there in our downtown retail, especially in the south of Broadway, and a lot of that is related to food and beverage. A lot of that void is already being filled, and it's like every week I think we're hearing of a new restaurant or a new brewery or something that's opening up. So I think that's already starting to fill. And we have 100,000 students in Nashville, and they tend to all love to come to downtown. So it's a big part of our downtown market. So overall, this is the overall 10-year development program summary. And again, that residential market kind of got increased from what was originally thought to be around 2,200 up to around 4,100 units over the next 10 years. The hotel and lodging, the 3,400 downtown hotel rooms, again, that's considered to be 8 to 12 new hotels. Office, and this is important for the office, at 250,000 to 500,000, that's not including the idea of a large corporate headquarters deciding to come into the city. That's the idea of being able to occupy these small pieces, small floor plates that would in aggregate be that much. But downtown corporate headquarters, certainly welcome, but that would be added to that number. And then retail ended up being in that 300 to 400,000 square feet, with a lot of that being food and beverage. So again, the area that we're looking at as an aerial of today, and then this ends up being, this is the great illustration that UDA did of kind of taking all of that and making kind of a cartoon out of it for what our city looks like right now. And part of the animation here kind of saying, what we're really looking at with this plan is building around the pieces that are already there. The idea of Music City Center, everything right now focused on that Walk of Fame Park. The roundabout and those existing kind of pikes coming out from that really give us a very strong party, kind of that beginning point. The connection over to the Gulch, which starts to make some of those connections that are really critical for the whole of downtown to work together. The green shows that Division Street connector that comes over to connect from Music Row, the Gulch, all the way through downtown and connecting over to the Howard School Fulton Complex. And then the idea of building on our commercial areas, our retail areas around the district, Cummins Station, where those areas are within the Gulch, M Street, and that lower part of the Gulch, and being able to expand in those areas. And now a little bit about the flood, and I know a lot of you, it's hard to forget that, about 3 years ago. This is the area, what you see in red is the area that was flooded in the May 2010 flood. This study was actually sponsored by the Department of Commerce, and one of the items that was looked at specifically was related to flood and flood mitigation. So part of what we did look at is we did recommend that there were parallel flood mitigation efforts that would be in place for downtown. That would be a combination of flood walls, permanent flood walls, temporary flood walls, some combination of that. We also recognize that we need big pumps, because as many of you know, the water didn't just come from on top of the ground in, it also came from underneath. So what this study recommends is that all of those efforts, parallel efforts, really be looked at together. There's a unified flood prevention plan that has been being looked at right now with Barge Wagner, Sumner and Cannon, and the Metro Water Services. That information is ongoing and should be having more finalized information on the exact level of that flood wall. It'll be over the next couple of years. It's a long process. While we're talking about flood, I just want to mention stormwater. Stormwater mitigation was really important. I don't have the slide up that shows all of the surface parking lots, but there are a considerable number of surface parking lots within south of Broadway. And two of the recommendations that have come out of this study relate to incentives for stormwater mitigation. One is a green roof incentive, and that's the idea. This area, Sobro, is not within the combined sewer overlay system. It's actually out of that. That may surprise many of you, but Broadway is the cut. Broadway North tends to be within the combined sewer. So the new green roof credit that Metro Water Services has offered is for the combined sewer overlay. Our recommendation is that areas that are within Sobro, if they meet all of the qualifications of the green roof credit program that is in place for the CSO, we recommend that the same benefit of only having to meet your 50% stormwater quality requirement rather than your 80% requirement should go into effect. In addition, we're recommending that the south of Broadway have the first stormwater district in the city, which means that public land, this would be for the first time, your public land, public rights of ways might be able to accept up to 30% of the stormwater quality requirements that a private business might have. So you might be able to buy stormwater credits. Very similar, many cities across the country have done that. Denver is one of those that we recognize most often. Another aspect of the study was looking at convention center potential expansions. And this was done with TBS and Tuck Hinton, kind of looking at that. And those options, of course, the idea of going south along 5th, to the west where the publishing house site is, to the north where First Baptist is. And the other one that we brought up in this process was using the existing arena as a fourth opportunity for expansion. One of the reasons for that, most arenas have a lifespan of 15 to 30 years. The arena is in year 16 right now. So not unusual to think that 5 or 10 years down the road, as the convention center starts looking at what's next, that might be a consideration. And then transportation, lots of information related to connectivity and how the entire system works together. So we did look at the series of 1- and 2-way streets. This indicates the one-way streets in blue, and actually recommended that a great deal of those one-way streets become two-way. This again is one of the things that the downtown mobility plan will be looking at more specifically. And then as we looked at transportation, we also looked at what the downtown, or the long-range transportation plan showed within the existing network. And so that's what you see here in green with the primary streets, the secondary streets in blue. And what it shows right now is that division goes straight across. What we've shown in red is we looked at a number of alternatives and through some pretty considerable study with our traffic engineer that was part of the team, looked at this option as our preferred alternative for actually connecting division through the south loop of South and Broadway. And then Complete Streets. That was, Complete Streets came as executive order in October of 2010, and Nashville has several great examples now of Complete Streets, and really the idea of incorporating that more throughout South and Broadway where we could. And when we're using the term Complete Streets, we mean not just for all forms of mobility, but what we like to call more complete streets, where we're also including green infrastructure. I mentioned to you that stormwater is aging in this area, so the idea of being able to incorporate green infrastructure in our street system would really be a positive here. And in this animation, one of the things that you also recognize, this is right along Lafayette, the idea of eliminating a lot of those fragments. I don't know how many of you ever try and cross Lafayette, but oh my gosh, you feel like you're taking your life in your hands. So the idea of eliminating those fragments, adding a couple of other pieces, and part of what you see here is making a connection off of Lafayette. This is 3rd and Lindsay right there. So making that connection so that you can actually make it all the way through from Hermitage to Lafayette. This Division Street coming all the way to the Howard School Fulton Complex. A number of these additional new streets that kind of have a little bit more logic in the way that they move through the system, but we didn't want to take them all out. We kind of like that quirkiness kind of coming through there. The extension of 5th Avenue right here, coming on down, you'll see later there's a park proposed, 5th Avenue of the Arts Park, and then a nice connection in to terminate at Lafayette. So we added a series of building on KBB as a complete street, adding Lafayette in, and a number of these other streets, kind of making a more comprehensive network. Now parks. You remember that little slide that I showed you, that one little postage stamp of green? Well, when we started on this plan, we had less than 10 acres, 7 to 10 acres total of green civic space within South of Broadway. And so that was a real focus. And these are the ones that are kind of in and around that area that we know and love, but we need a lot more than that. And so the idea of being able to add layering of additional parks into South of Broadway became very important. not just at that kind of regional scale, but getting down to the neighborhood and the idea of even incorporating, where can we incorporate green and open space in private development. And so in the South of Broadway plan, a lot of attention was paid to that. We had 7 acres. This plan actually adds 49 acres of new park. In addition to that 49 acres of new park, it's 12,500 linear feet, a couple miles of new complete streets, and an additional 5,000 linear feet of new cycle tracks or greenway. So it's trying to make a considerable change towards the amount of green space we have. And we did look at Trust for Public Lands, great information on comparable cities, and kind of really tried to look at that. And as we started comparing ourselves to other comparable cities, we felt like we needed to hit at least 39 acres. We were able to surpass that with 49. And what you'll see, and what we really did, is we wanted to make sure that where we put our regional focus is along what we think is our biggest regional asset, which is the river. And so where we're making our biggest statement for open space is here at the thermal site, and in this area that we refer to as the Rolling Mill Hill Bottoms. And then an animation kind of this saying it's building off of KDB and Fifth Avenue of the Arts, kind of going up. The existing Walk of Fame, Hall of Fame, Gateway, Hilton, whatever I don't really know the real name, but you all know the part that I'm talking about. That it started, that's kind of where it started. We say that one needs to be relooked at. The focus and the direction of how that park is accessed and everything around it has changed dramatically in the 12 years since it was in place. But what we have now is, in addition to thermal and the bottoms, which is just off, is this series of neighborhood parks. So the idea that every neighborhood has a park around which to focus. And all of those parks end up being various sizes, from like 2 acres to 2.5, 3 acres, and Hunter will talk a little bit about some of the focus of that. Layered on top of that are this series of kind of connections, greenways, and connected trails that kind of go through here. And then what you see in yellow is the bike system, a really integral part of our open space system. And I will mention also that in the transportation recommendations and bike recommendations, it is also that there are a number of bike centers that are located in several places in downtown, not just one central bike center that allows that to be more accessible. And the railroad land bridge, the whole idea of being able to make that connection over. And Hunter will hit this just a little bit more as he kind of talks about the neighborhoods. But that was a really important thing that came up in connections. This has been talked about for quite some time. Gary, I know the Design Center has been looking at it for some time. This was a big focus of the open space master plan, that connectivity coming on across. And so it's been looked at and explored in a variety of different environments. So this is great that this is now kind of moving forward with a little bit more attention. And then before I hand it to Hunter, just a tiny bit about public art. And one of our goals in this plan is that public art and stormwater, those are all integral systems with our transportation system, with our park system. None of these things happen by themselves. But again, the Design Center did a study about saying, here's where the best locations are for public art. We totally agree with that. And so we think there are absolutely locations along thermal, but we also feel like arts need to be incorporated into our streetscapes in an integral part, and not just pieces of art that are placed in different locations. So that has also been an important part of the study. And then kind of moving into the neighborhoods, and I'll let Hunter do that. And as he's coming up, I just kind of want to show you the full plan. If you haven't seen it, this is like my only printed copy that I have, but you can download this at the Music City Center site, as well as the Nashville Downtown Partnership site. And we're hitting the tip of the iceberg in here. There's a lot of information in this plan that you can read a lot more about. And so with that, I'll let Hunter talk neighborhoods.
Thanks, Kim. I'm just going to drill down a little closer on the four neighborhoods, which were really defined by the downtown community plan that the planning department has established. And Kim mentioned them earlier, but the Gulch, Sobro, Rutledge Hill, and then the Lafayette neighborhood. So, the Gulch is really well on its way. I mean, it's been, there's a master plan that guides development that occurs in the Gulch. MDHA and the Market Street Enterprises, the master developer, oversees the implementation of that. But through the public process, we heard a number of things specifically related to the Gulch. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on the Gulch because that plan is well underway and is working. But specifically, we heard two things. More open space in the Gulch, or open space is needed in the Gulch, as well as connectivity. So we've identified a couple of locations within the Gulch for open space. There's a triangular piece of property, privately owned, so it would have to be acquired, but privately owned here next to the railroad tracks, which we think would make for a great play park, dog park. The Gulch has really sort of been its second generation. Many residents may have bought there 8-10 years ago, and maybe they were singled in, maybe they're married now, they're having children, they have dogs, and so the needs have changed quite a bit for a lot of the residents there. And so the addition of a play park and dog park, we think, would be extremely valuable for the Gulch and the development down there. We support the idea of the Gulch Greenway, which has been well underway and been studied as part of the overall network. And as sort of, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but as part of the Gulch Greenway, the idea of the pedestrian connection, connecting back and forth, as Kim mentioned, from the Gulch, we heard not only from business owners in the Sobro area and the district that being able to more easily connect to the Gulch is important, and certainly for visitors coming to the Music City Center, but also from residents in the Gulch. I had a resident tell me, who lives in Icon, that he drives to the Predators game, and shame on him. But the point is that the railroad track, well, first of all, Demonbreun has about a 7-foot wide sidewalk, which is not a very wide sidewalk, and there's cars zipping by right next to you. And so our plan calls for not only the pedestrian connection here across the railroad tracks, but an expansion of the Demonbreun viaduct on the south side, or perhaps both sides, but specifically on the south side, into more of a promenade. And that has the potential to connect to the land port. We think the top of the land port could be utilized, even though right now it's being leased by the Union Station Hotel for valet. But the top of the land port could be utilized for tennis courts, basketball courts, recreation facilities for downtown residents and office workers, and then ultimately could connect to the pedestrian bridge, creating a loop throughout the Gulch area and then connecting back to the roundabout and to Sobro. Likewise, as Kim mentioned, of course, the connection of Division Street across. We think this is really important. For perhaps as much, the biggest benefit we see is the sort of the way it could act as a catalyst for the Lafayette neighborhood. I'll get into the Lafayette neighborhood a little bit more in a minute. But creating another east-west connection, as you all know, Demonbreun Street has become as much of a gateway into downtown as Broadway historically has been, with all the development that's happening in the South of Broadway area. And we really need, in addition to, of course, 8th Avenue connecting here, we really need another east-west connection here with Division Street. And really, as most of you have probably driven up to the end of Division Street or gone to Frugal McDougal's there, it appears that it was designed to ultimately connect across. There's a little bit of a challenge in terms of getting clearance over the CSX tracks. However, the way we've aligned this, we're trying to take advantage as much of the grade as possible, and we believe it can be done connecting back over to Lafayette. So I'll skip sort of across what we call the crescent of development, which which I'll talk about in just a second, to Rutledge Hill and Rolling Mill Hill. Similar issues here. Rolling Mill Hill has had a master plan in place for over 10 years now. MDHA is overseeing the development of what's called Rolling Mill Hill, the old General Hospital site. There's been a lot of momentum there over the last few years with the development of Nance Place, the redevelopment of the old hospital buildings here that were converted from condominiums taken by the bank, purchased and converted to apartments, and have been incredibly successful. The transformation of the trolley barns, and then the recent opening of the artist lofts, Ryman lofts here, and then also, I guess another element of our implementation success so far is we recommended as part of the next phase of development or Rolling Mill Hill that a significant amount of open space be included in that. And so MDHA, during this process, MDHA put out an RFP that for these 3 blocks of Rolling Mill Hill to developers, and included in that RFP that a significant portion of the land would need to be dedicated to open space, allowing residents of the Sobro and Lafayette neighborhoods to connect through all the way to the promenade along the river that Kim mentioned earlier. And Kim mentioned the bottoms here. We think that's a little ways off in terms of timeline. As Rolling Mill Hill and Rutledge Hill continue to become more intense and more dense and more residents are living in this area, this is all in the floodplain down below, where the tracks are, but would make great recreation fields for all the residents in downtown. A couple of things to point out as well from a connectivity perspective. Academy Place, the Civic Design Center did a concept for a little parklet here, which we're essentially adopting into this plan, which is the terminus of Academy Place. This is where the pedestrian bridge connects across the interstate to the neighborhood to the south. And with some improvements to that bridge and the dead end here at Academy Place turned into a parklet, we think we can strengthen the connectivity between the neighborhood to the south and Rutledge Hill. And then also Captain Ryman's Garden is what we're calling it. The big, large open space there along 2nd Avenue next to the radio station, we think would make a great community garden and park space. And should become that neighborhood park for the Rutledge Hill area, as well as improvements to the Howard School campus. There's a lot of green space at Howard School currently that could be utilized with a few improvements. So Sobro, I heard someone before we started tonight mention the concern about Sobro just being all hotels, and we have the same concern, and not just all hotels, but specifically limited service hotels. And while we think limited service hotels have a place in our downtown, we're concerned about sort of the type of place that the limited service hotel prototypes typically create. And so we took a very close look at Korean Veterans Boulevard. And we looked at the downtown code, and we looked at MDHA's design review guidelines, and have made some very specific recommendations in the plan to alter the design guidelines on KVB to help mitigate some of the potential negatives of the limited service hotels. One of those is the downtown code currently requires a 3-story minimum height. We're recommending that they increase that to 5 stories. We're also recommending active uses, not including hotel rooms, but active uses should be enforced along Korean Veterans Boulevard along the ground floor. So that would include retail, restaurants, and so on. And then there's also a few things in there about parking and parking garages, and so very specific recommendations to help ensure that we create that very active urban boulevard along Korean Veterans Boulevard. Again, I mentioned earlier the idea of the Bicentennial Mall on the south side. Well, in a way, we already have it. We have, is it 9 acres, Kim, at the thermal site, 12 acres at the thermal site that the city owns. We don't have to go purchase. We've already begun investing in our riverfront. We have a riverfront master plan that needs to continue to be implemented. And so, again, as Kim mentioned, the importance of the thermal plant site being dedicated to civic open space and public access along the riverfront, connecting to the promenade at Rolling Mill Hill and to Riverfront Park and beyond is a critical component of the plan and a real opportunity. So we're really pleased that the city has embraced that idea and moving it forward. So we did a model of what the downtown code allows. Many of you probably are aware that we rezoned our entire downtown a couple of years ago. And what you're seeing here is 30-story buildings along here. This is essentially Peabody Place along the backside. So both sides of Korean Veterans Boulevard, all the way over to the Gulch and near the river, you can, by right, build 30-story towers. Now, we don't believe 30-story towers are going to happen on every block, so and really would think that would be somewhat unfortunate. But the reasons, now residential is a little easier to do 30-story towers on a small footprint and park it, but with office, hotel development, either of those uses, being able to assemble the amount of land, park it on the amount of land, and it takes a pretty large footprint to create both office and hotel uses along there. So we would envision along KDB more of a 8 to 12 story, 15-story. Certainly you may get a 30-story tower, but specifically we believe near the roundabout that, and I'll show an image of this in a minute, but near the roundabout is where we really ought to be encouraging more height. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we've got a big void of activity right there now. We need the critical mass and the people and the activity to generate the market for ground floor storefronts and so on. Secondly, the roundabout is big. It's a large civic space, and so it can really handle more height around it. And then third, there are a number of very large pieces of property or properties that are owned by a single owner. And so the ability to assemble the kind of land that would allow you to build the amount of parking that would serve 30-story towers is very realistic. So we think that's all a good thing, and we begin to fill that gap in between what's happening in the Gulch, Sobro, and downtown with a lot of activity and people. So that's what, of course, Sobro looks like today. Lots of parking lots, one-story buildings. Again, we're recommending much more intensity around the roundabout. 8 to 12-story buildings anticipated. Again, there's probably, it's likely that there's going to be more variation through here along the boulevard. Thermal site, acidic open space, the connection to the Gulch. Of course, that's what KDB looked like about 6 or 8 months ago when we started the project. This is what we envisioned. Again, this is the Omni on the right-hand side, looking out with, of course, the boulevard, complete street that's been constructed and hopefully open soon, with the taller buildings around the roundabout and 8 to 12-story buildings along the way. Now, the Lafayette neighborhood, I mentioned the term, the crescent of development that has occurred over the last few years, and essentially, almost by definition, by the planning department's definition of these neighborhoods, this crescent of development activity has occurred surrounding the Lafayette neighborhood. I'll show a map in a second, but essentially this line is pretty consistent with the redevelopment district boundaries, and redevelopment districts give the city several opportunities. One, it gives the city the opportunity to offer incentives through tax increment financing. It gives the city a little more opportunity for condemnation, and it gives the city the ability to put additional design guidelines and overlays and controls on what actually happens in those areas. So it was interesting to us that that this area has seen very little activity and is outside the redevelopment district. So as Kim mentioned, we're recommending that either a new redevelopment district be formed for the Lafayette neighborhood or an expansion of the Rutledge Hill, Capitol Mall, or Arts redevelopment and or Arts redevelopment district to encompass the entire Lafayette neighborhood. So you guys know what it looks like today, a lot of one-story buildings, a lot of supply houses, vacant buildings, a very wide 6-lane Lafayette street that we believe is certainly underutilized. While we would anticipate a lot more cars on it as the south of Broadway area continues to develop, we don't think it warrants 6 lanes, and as Kim mentioned, we're recommending the transformation of Lafayette from a six-lane thoroughfare into a 4-lane complete street for transit, for bicycles, for pedestrians. This is the diagram. These are the redevelopment districts. This is the Rutledge Hill redevelopment district, the Capitol Mall redevelopment district, and the Arts redevelopment district. So again, the big white void there is the Lafayette neighborhood. And some of the area, of course, north of Lafayette as well. So again, this is what it looks like today. We envision, we took a close look at the downtown code, and we felt like the downtown code was very appropriate in terms of the massing that's allowed within it for the Lafayette neighborhood specifically, in that we envision a 5 to 7 story sort of moderate density urban mixed use walkable neighborhood with, as Kim mentioned earlier, neighborhood parks throughout, serving both sides of Lafayette. This is near Rocketown and the terminus of Fifth Avenue. As Kim mentioned earlier, transforming some of these intersections into simpler, cleaner, more safer intersections at Lafayette, which will actually open up some development opportunities. There's a number of very small, strange, triangulated parcels there that we believe with hopefully the mobility study will concur and will sort of validate some of these recommendations to eliminate some of the strange connections and create some new ones that open up some opportunities. This will be right next to Tuck Hinton's office. Is anyone from Tuck Hinton here? Okay. Our first plan demolished your building. But Steve came to one of the meetings and said I couldn't do it. No, so their great office in the old church there would overlook. You'll see that in the rendering here in just a second. So that's what Lafayette looks like today. There's Tuck Hinton's office over to the right. And then that's what we would envision in the future. Again, a complete street for bicycles, transit, stormwater, 5 to 7 story buildings, neighborhood parks. One of the other things we heard, as Kim mentioned, we heard let's sort of build on what Sobro is today. And I think probably the person that put it the best was the vice mayor, who said let's keep it funky. And we think we can learn a lot from some of the things that have been done in other places, even in the Gulch, where some of the old 1-story, 2-story warehouse buildings that 15 years ago appeared to really have no value, they preserved those. And so if you look at some of these buildings that, again, today you would think, well, we should probably just tear this down and build new. In the Gulch, they said, well, maybe there's some value there, and maybe we can build up through those. So Mercury View Lofts, as well as the Housing Fund's Laurel Street Flats, and a couple other projects have actually taken advantage of some of the sort of the old relics that are there, and we think that should be done in the Lafayette neighborhood too. So watch these buildings in this next rendering, essentially transforming those into storefronts, being able to build up through, get more intensity, more activity, and extending the idea of Avenue of the Arts all the way down Fifth Avenue to Lafayette. Similarly, this is an old, at one time it was used as an ice house. I'm not sure originally if that's what it was used as, but this is on the south side of Lafayette. Again, the reuse of that structure, building up more intensely beyond it, creating a neighborhood park right across the street, and really creating a mixed-use, heavily residential neighborhood with active streets and streetscapes throughout. We also looked at the downtown circulator, we expect this to hopefully be looked at a little closer in the mobility plan. We have a few observations. One, the green line, if anybody uses the downtown circulator, the green one, you'll know the green line was redirected when the convention center went under construction to run down Broadway. And they've seen a drop in ridership. We believe that's because Cummins Station and the United Methodist Publishing House here created a lot of ridership. So we're recommending the green line essentially go back to Denumbrian now that the convention center is built. MTA seem very open to that. And then be extended a little further into the Gulch as development continues to sort of creep to the east all the way to 8th Avenue. We also looked at the purple line, expanding that a bit, pushing it over further to 5th Avenue, running past the Country Music Hall of Fame, the Convention Center, and the arena. And then we're also recommending a 4th circulator be looked at closely that we've been just calling the hotel circulator. We think there's a, whenever you go to a convention, you get out of your session and you usually don't go right out to dinner. Everybody wants to go back to their hotel room, kick off their shoes, rest a bit, and then you'll meet out later. And so the idea of connecting the convention center to all the hotels in downtown, perhaps in the meantime, as the Midtown hotels are being utilized for the convention center, perhaps even connecting to some of those as well. And then connecting that loop to the Gulch and to the entertainment district, the district on Second and Broad, we think could offer a lot of opportunity to be promoted specifically to the visitors of Nashville. So, Gary, how much time do we have?
Till 7.
Till 7? Another 15 minutes? Okay.
Time for questions.
Yeah, so we'll be happy to take any questions, comments, ideas. Plan has been published, but certainly happy to receive any feedback. Hopefully you all participated in some of the public meetings as well. Yes,
I'm just curious why you didn't touch 8th Avenue and Canary Row at all. It seems like that's kind of a blind spot.
well, every block didn't get rendered. Someone asked in the plan drawing, there's sort of white areas in this area, and every block didn't get rendered. Certainly, we would anticipate the same pattern of development throughout the Lafayette neighborhood, to occur here. It was just graphically.
So nothing special with the pedestrian bridge and kind of the event space that's already existing there?
Well, this is actually an older rendering before the pedestrian
Oh, yeah.
bridge got dropped in. We need to get that updated, I guess. But what's your question about the
I was just curious. It seemed like an area that wasn't covered in the presentation. Everything else is great, and then there's this kind of it seems like a neighborhood that's special in its own right. And
This is the actual plan drawing, and what we're recommending is a connection directly from the roundabout to the pedestrian bridge here that would cross the CSX railroad. So we agree with you. It may not be as apparent in the drawings. Christine?
There's been talk about doing an amphitheater on the thermal site that kind of waxes and wanes, and then of course there's been amphitheaters kind of scattered around the city in various places. Is the plan for thermal that you're considering, is that going to stay complete open space, or will it, is there thought of putting an amphitheater there, or having the site so that it could accommodate that, or not?
Do you want to?
Yeah, I'd say that right now we're exploring options. So I would say all of those things are being looked at right now as possibilities. Nothing's been ruled out.
And that's something that maybe you could open to the audience here is what types of qualitative uses would you like to see happen in the thermal site area, or the proposal of the pedestrian bridge, what should it look like, or what types of features would you like to see there?
Yeah, some of the people who currently live up on Redwood Hill are frankly terrified of an amphitheater just because of the noise values, because they say that since the noise ordinance doesn't apply to that territory. And although I'm sure other people, the mayor has always spoken positively about it, so I think it could, I agree with Gary. I think some kind of public discussion would be a good idea.
And we're open to certainly hearing any of that tonight, for sure. Debbie?
Yeah, I understand where the boundary was for the study. Was there any conversation about the other side of the interstate that gets you, you know, 4th Avenue going out along Nolensville or toward Nolensville?
There wasn't a lot. I mean, there were certainly some. There were residents that came.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
the Cameron Trimble.
Right, right.
Yeah, and I would say the study, in the detailed study talks a little bit about those gateways
Right.
from some of those couplets and the 6th Avenue as a connector kind of through to go down to Adventure Science Center.
Right.
So there are a number of places in the study where it talks about each of those gateways, especially related to how you get off the interstate and start to come into the south of Broadway area as gateways. But our study did not continue, from a planning standpoint, past that boundary.
But did you receive like community feedback during the public meeting?
We did. We actually had some focus groups that included, I think we had the public, but we also had some focus groups that included, especially the Chestnut Hill area. We had representation from a number of property owners, artists that were in the Chestnut Hill area that participated in focus groups, yes. Yep. Cliff?
Yeah, I know it's at the very edge of the plan area, but does the plan incorporate the east-west connector plan as far as the connectivity? And
I would say the east-west connector is absolutely anticipated in this plan. You are exactly right, it was right at the edge, but it definitely was anticipated.
Throughout the process, it was
Yeah.
assumed to be a given.
There's right here.
Yeah. The one-way street map was pretty interesting. Has it ever been brought up that maybe there's a degree of safety for the pedestrian that isn't in a car when they're crossing one-way streets as opposed to making them all two-way?
Well, what I will say about the one-way and two-way street system is that is a part as well. There are a number of items that have been recommended in this plan that we recommended get further study in the downtown mobility plan, which is the one that's out right now. And I don't know when that decision will be made, but pretty soon. And I believe the timing of that study would have that plan complete within the year. So all of those issues, and the downtown mobility plan does include equally vehicles, transit, pedestrian safety, and cycles. So I would think that that'll get a lot more study in that plan, but really good.
I would add to that. I mean, certainly the mobility study is going to look at that a lot closer than we did. But I think it was generally our team's, and there's different theories on this, but generally our team's opinion is, with certainly UDA's experience, is that two-way streets tend to be safer. Tend to be safer for pedestrians, bicycles. They're also better for retail, for active uses. They're better for visitors in terms of navigating the street system. So that was sort of the underlying approach, under that assumption. That was certainly, that's going to be looked at a lot closer in the mobility study. Yes, sir.
I just have a question. There's a lot of homeless service providers in that area, and I was wondering if the plan incorporated a way to coexist, or is there going to be some change between vision in that area?
The plan does not specifically recommend removal of any of the homeless facilities and services in the area. We know it was raised as one of the biggest concerns. We've heard it from the private sector development and property owner community in the area. I'll give you my personal opinion about it. That's not in the plan, but I think the pressure's on. I mean, I think the real estate values are beginning to get to a point where, ultimately they're sitting on a gold mine here.
It's the largest parcel, largest single parcel there is.
Right, and so that, along with more contemporary thinking about how to service the homeless in a more dispersed way, which
Similar to Room in the Inn, which we think has done a great job, is a great example of how to accommodate.
right. And so, we recognize in the plan that the concentration of homeless men is a concern, certainly of the community, and really is somewhat of a problem. But, we think the market forces may, to some degree, turn into somewhat of a win-win situation. The other way to look at it too is you think about it probably throughout Manhattan, and we don't anticipate south of Broadway being Manhattan, but I bet there's 600 bed facilities throughout Manhattan and you don't even realize it because there's so much intensity and so much activity and so many other uses and so many people because of the density that the impact of having a concentration of homeless men is negligible. So as the area starts to intensify, right now it's almost the only people using the streets down there are the homeless. And so as development continues to occur, that'll become, I believe, less noticeable. Bob?
The plan looked at Lafayette, as you discussed, and I think it's good that it recommended basically reducing the lanes, the number of lanes traveled. I was wondering, can you address what the plan looked at in terms of 2nd and 4th Avenue? And I guess one of my specific questions is whether or not you looked at maybe repurposing a lane there, because it's, you've got 3 lanes in each direction, and traffic volumes probably not necessarily require that much many lanes.
What we did look at in the 2nd and 4th, and again, the bottom line for this is it will be looked at in a lot more detail in the downtown mobility plan, but what we did look at in the 2nd and 4th was to keep them one way until you got basically to KBB. And then at that point, from when you go north of KBB, making those 2-way to add to that network of 2-way streets.
I think the idea, and hopefully the mobility plan would look just at that. I mean, that would be consistent with the vision for the whole Sobro area in terms of creating more pedestrian-friendly, bike-friendly streets. And we did hear from...
like separated bike lanes for those streets?
We did not consider separated. Our bike system uses 3rd and 6th. And we had some good focus groups on that, but that's in the open space plan, but that network used 3rd and 6th as our primary north-south. A lot of the feedback that we got is most of the cyclists did not want to use 2nd and 4th because of the traffic volumes and speeds that were being used right there, and we're more comfortable using 3rd and 6th.
And we're, and we've had a number of meetings with Public Works as well, and probably of everything in the south of Broadway area that they were sort of most concerned about, and hopefully through the mobility study it'll be looked at a lot closer and alternatives will be studied, but is the 2nd and 4th one-way. It was mentioned as an evacuation route. I didn't know we had an official evacuation route, but certainly at rush hour it's the evacuation hour.
Aside from increased dining restaurants and things of that nature, has there been any type of conversation about maybe a smaller grocery store coming into these areas or community gardens, so to speak, in any of these open spaces?
Yeah, we actually have. In fact, most every park has a little bit more of a specific use to it. Specifically for the community gardens, that's where we thought the Captain Ryman Park, that's kind of right there in the middle of Rutledge Hill. It was fairly central location for the Rolling Mill Hill and the Rutledge Hill neighborhood. So we thought that would serve a great purpose there, and because of its location. As far as the grocery store, absolutely, that would be welcomed within that whole retail. That kind of idea of retail would absolutely include grocery. And at the time, with the number of downtown residential residents, with that kind of being increased up to, I think we're getting close to 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 by the time the 10-year projected market study, you would probably start to be able to actually support a small grocery. Of course, we have a turnip truck right now. So we have one that's really a great asset to the Gulch.
Certainly, our plan would
Neighborhood residents,
encourage
convenience.
those types of conveniences for, and community gardens, really, in any of the neighborhood parks.
So, I'm assuming you looked at the Metro tree canopy assessment that was done, and then so is the goal to put new tree plantings in the public right-of-way for complete streets, or, I mean, to my knowledge, there has not been new tree plantings other than the Bolton campus in that area in a very, very long time. It's just, there's no shade at all.
Actually, I think you'll see if you look in the study actually says street tree plantings for every street. So it's really clear that it says for every street. And then the complete streets was a way to really be able to focus on that and to make sure that in those areas we really have, because the biggest issue with downtown urban trees is the fact that we don't have enough root zone to really support it. So the idea of putting in a little 4x4 tree grate is not going to cut it. And that's where the idea of complete streets and really along the lines of what KBB is doing now, which we're providing really adequate root zone to allow those trees to actually mature and not just be put in place. The other part of this, and boy, I could really go off on this one, but maintenance. We can't just plant them, we've got to maintain them. Everybody loves the idea, it's real sexy to go out and plant a tree, and it's not real sexy to put water on it, but we gotta do both.
Yeah, you talked about extending Fifth Avenue with the arts now, which sounds like a great idea, but do you have any idea, does the plan address any kind of incentives to do that, or do again have opinions? I'm thinking of things like what was done maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago, how long, called South, with some of the streetscape down there that, took all these attraction, but it seemed to make a difference. Was there an idea of a theme, either on the streetscape, the ways to look up and down that?
Part of, it's a great question, Clay. Just a little bit about what's going on right now. Some of you might know that Fifth Avenue North is getting some additional streetscape right now, kind of related to where the galleries are. A lot of the galleries are at Church Street, kind of north. Also, right there from KBB going up, this area between Omni and the Convention Center, that streetscape is a completely different kind of streetscape than we've had in the city before that really kind of allows that area between the hotel and the Convention Center to almost serve as a plaza. And the idea is for some of those improvements will extend north to Broadway. So the idea of being able to take some of those ideas, which then will go from KBB almost all the way up to, what was that, the Union, and be able to extend that down Fifth, come with this idea of having this arts park right here, and then do a termination with the median and the idea of sculpture incorporated so that you actually have a really gracious relationship and terminus at Lafayette. This is one of those most confusing intersections on Lafayette. So that's kind of what we were thinking is the Avenue of the Arts will kind of terminate in a really gracious way that this serves almost as a gateway in.
So I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
It sounds like
This gentleman right here has had his hand up since the very beginning.
I wonder if you could explain a little bit that I found contradictory in the plan. You talk about closing off streets that were confusing and stubs, whilst the plan, and I thought this was really good, went on a lot about active transport, pedestrianisation and cycling, which would, I would have thought pedestrianisation would automatically assume higher permeability, but you seem to talk about closing off small streets and stubs. Could you talk a little to that, seem a little contradiction
Yeah,
to
we
you?
may need to go to that, let's see if this is that, go down, that might be, go to the, right here, let's see if this is it.
Can you pause?
It's the next one, sorry, keep going.
See if I can pause
This
that.
one. Part of what we have is there are all these little bitty remnants that kind of make for some real awkwardness at Lafayette.
For cars.
For cars, which also mean for pedestrians, because some of your directions, sometimes you're going along Lafayette and you might have, I would venture to say 100 feet without a sidewalk, because it's just, you have a street coming in and another street coming in and this little island in the middle. And so what it does is it allows you to eliminate some of those little pieces that become these little remnants, these little triangles. And then that's kind of been reorganized, if you will, with some of those. Go a little bit further. Sorry. And it's almost easiest to see in the Lafayette, there we go. So when some of those other little tiny pieces go away and then you try and reorganize it to make it make a little bit more sense, actually we're reducing the distance that the pedestrian needs to cross all of those travel ways as well, or a bicycle.
Because we agree with you.
Yeah.
And that we think connecting the grid, keeping the permeability of the pedestrian network throughout is really important. And that those intersections with 3 or 4 streets coming into a really wide road are horrible experiences. Difficult for automobiles, but also horrible.
Yeah. But in general, the policy about the pedestrian cycling was really good. It's just that permeability was not mentioned, but closing off streets was mentioned. I was like,
Yeah, and that's part that
the
we
word
were working
permeability
here.
didn't appear, but neither did the concept. Didn't get mentioned.
Because it's really right there on Lafayette, and we weren't very clear about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to be conscious of the time, and we're at the end, so please help me thank our presenters.